Welcome to another deep dive, you guys. It's been on my mind a lot lately, this whole thing with celebrity culture
Mhm.
and how much it like messes with our ideas about relationships.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
what's real, what's not.
totally.
And we found this YouTube video and it just like tackles it head on. And I wanted to go through it with you.
Yeah.
Um, what what stuck out to you the most about it?
I think, I think what was really interesting was just how this video
Mm.
really calls out this thing that we do where we put celebrities on this pedestal
Yeah.
and treat them like relationship extras,
Yes.
which is just like, I don't know, like
Crazy.
it's weird, right?
It's so weird. And the video uses this example of when Sia and her wife Rachel,
Yeah.
I think it's Cole,
Colsey, yeah.
when they split up
Right.
and people were just like, "Oh my God."
If it can happen to them.
Yeah, it's happening to them. Like, who are you?
Oh,
And I thought that was so interesting because it's like, how dare they have a human experience? Like, how dare they be just like us and go through a breakup? And it's
right.
like, what does that do to everybody else's view of like relationships?
I think that's a really great point. I think it really highlights the danger
Mm.
of idealizing these celebrity couples. Their lives are so different from ours.
Right.
And their relationships play out on this like public stage.
Yeah.
So it's not really a realistic comparison for us.
Yeah, and especially I was thinking about for people who are like just starting to figure out relationships,
Right.
like if your only model is what you see in like tabloids or whatever,
Oh gosh.
it's no wonder expectations get all messed up.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the video does a good job of kind of contrasting that with, these fleeting,
Right.
often manufactured images of love with the idea of like something more enduring. I
Yeah.
was thinking about that, like how much of our like relationship knowledge, quote unquote,
Mm.
comes from sources that prioritize like drama
Yes.
and sensationalism over like genuine connection.
That's such a good point. Like, where are we supposed to be getting this advice from?
Right, right.
That's like the big question.
Where do we turn?
Yeah, where do we turn?
Well, so this video leans pretty heavily on faith,
Okay.
even quotes Hebrews 12:2 about fixing our eyes on Jesus.
Okay, so the speaker's framing it as looking to Christ as the ultimate model for like how we should expect to be treated
Right.
in any relationship.
Right.
It's an interesting analogy. Do you think that limits the video's appeal?
Um, I think it definitely centers the conversation around a specific worldview,
Okay.
but I do think even if you don't share that faith perspective, the underlying message of choosing your role models carefully still resonates.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do, yeah.
Like instead of getting swept up in the latest celebrity couple drama, maybe look to people who embody the values that you actually admire.
Yeah, and that could be people in your own life. It could be historical figures. It could even be like characters in books. It's about finding those guiding lights that offer a different kind of wisdom than what we're getting from all this like pop culture noise.
I love that. It makes me curious, where do you tend to look for those guiding lights in your own life?
I think for me.
Actually, before you answer that, can I just pick up on something you mentioned earlier about the video's emotional appeal?
Oh, yeah.
It is very powerful.
Yeah.
I do think relying solely on emotion can sometimes oversimplify really complex issues.
That's true. Yeah, it's like we can get so caught up in the emotional highs and lows of celebrity culture without like stopping to think critically about what's actually happening.
Right,
That's
exactly.
actually being presented to us.
And while encouraging people to find strength in their faith can be so positive,
Mm-hmm.
relationships are messy
Mm.
and nuanced, right?
Yeah, totally.
And it's important to acknowledge that faith alone might not be the answer for everyone
Right.
or for every situation.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
totally. And I think the video does touch on that a little bit when the speaker asks for prayers for celebrities.
Yes.
It's kind of a reminder that even those in the spotlight are still just human, you know?
Yeah.
They're facing real struggles just like the rest of us.
Right. And it brings us back to this idea that everyone, famous or not, really needs support and that sense of community.
And I think it highlights the need for compassion and understanding, especially when we're talking about these sensitive topics like relationships.
Absolutely. And, I think what's really fascinating here is how this video, while focusing on marriage, also touches on this much broader point about the influence of celebrity culture.
Yeah, it's not just about relationships.
Yeah.
It's about how celebrities shape our thinking and behavior in all sorts of ways.
Totally.
Like what we wear to how we spend our money.
Exactly. And it brings us back to that mission of being well-informed.
Yeah.
We need like critical thinking skills to navigate this constant barrage of information and influences.
Not just when it comes to celebrities, but
Yeah.
it's everywhere.
Everywhere, all the time.
So instead of just like blindly following trends or
Yeah.
taking everything at face value, we need to be more discerning, ask questions.
Question everything.
Yeah. About the messages we're getting bombarded with.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that celebrities can be entertaining,
Yeah,
even inspiring
for
sometimes,
sure.
but they shouldn't be the sole architects of our lives.
It makes me think about all the times I felt pressured to buy something or act a certain way just because a celebrity was doing it.
Oh, I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
It's easy to fall into that trap of comparison.
Especially with social media, it's like,
Oh my gosh. And these perfect lives.
And it's important to remember that those images are often just so carefully curated.
Right.
They don't reflect the full picture.
So how do we break free from that?
That's where the critical thinking comes in.
Okay.
It's about asking ourselves questions like, why do I want this?
Yeah.
Does this align with my values? My values, yeah.
Like being mindful of those influences
Mm-hmm.
and making conscious decisions about what we allow to shape our thoughts and actions.
It's about like taking back control of the narrative
Yes.
instead of letting these outside forces dictate our choices.
Exactly.
We're actively deciding what we want our lives to look like.
And that can be a really empowering shift, you know.
It's
It's about recognizing that we have agency
yeah.
and the ability to create a life that feels authentic and fulfilling.
Regardless of what celebrity culture is saying.
Exactly. Regardless.
I think a big part of that is surrounding yourself with people
Yes.
who support and encourage you to be your true self.
Absolutely.
People who challenge you to think critically.
Yes.
Make choices that are aligned with your values.
Building a strong support system, whether that's friends, family, mentors, even online communities,
Yeah.
can make a huge difference.
You know, it's funny because as much as we're talking about these downsides of celebrity influence, I do think there's a place for celebrating the good that they can bring.
I totally agree.
Like celebrities who use their platform to raise awareness for important causes
Yes.
or inspire positive change.
There's a lot of good that can come from that, for sure.
Well, it's like anything else.
Yeah.
There's a balance to be struck.
A balance.
We can appreciate, even learn from celebrities
Right.
without letting them dictate our every thought and action.
Exactly. And that's why critical thinking is so crucial.
Yes.
It helps us discern the good from the bad,
Yeah.
the helpful from the harmful,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately allows us to make choices that serve us well.
Individually and collectively.
Yes.
I'm so glad we dug into this. It's given me a lot to think about in terms of how I navigate the world of celebrity culture
Me too.
and make sure it's not like pulling me in directions I don't want to go.
Right. Exactly.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to circle back to something the speaker mentioned about how comparing ourselves to celebrities can be so damaging,
Oh, yeah.
especially when it comes to relationships.
I think that's such an important point. It's so easy to get caught up in the highlight reels we see on social media
Right.
and start feeling inadequate, or like our own relationships don't measure up.
Especially when you consider how much of what we see online is like filtered and edited.
Oh, yeah. It's not real life.
It's not real.
Like comparing our everyday lives to a movie set.
Exactly.
It's just not a fair comparison.
So what can we do to combat that tendency to compare and despair?
I think a good starting point is just being more mindful of the content we consume.
Okay.
Like, are we following accounts that make us feel good about ourselves and inspire us?
Yeah.
Or are we constantly bombarded with images that make us feel insecure or envious?
That's such good advice.
It's like choosing to nourish ourselves with positive, uplifting content instead of filling our minds with negativity and comparisons.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to remember that everyone's journey is different.
Mm-hmm.
Just because someone else seems to have it all together
Right.
doesn't mean that they do. We're all just doing the best we can with what we've got.
It's like don't compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel.
Exactly. And I think that applies to relationships as much as anything else.
Totally.
Everyone faces challenges. Everyone goes through ups and downs.
Yeah, it's part of being human.
It is.
So instead of getting caught up in the comparisons, maybe we should be focusing on building genuine connections.
Yes.
And celebrating the unique beauty of our own relationships, imperfections and all.
I love that. It's about embracing authenticity and recognizing that real love isn't about perfection.
Right.
It's about growth, acceptance,
Yeah.
and supporting each other through thick and thin.
And speaking of support, I think that's something we could all use a little more of, especially in a world that can feel very isolating.
Totally.
and competitive.
You're absolutely right. Building a strong support system of friends, family, mentors, even online communities
Yeah.
can make a huge difference in helping us navigate the pressures of life and stay grounded in our values.
You know, it's interesting how this conversation has come full circle. We started by talking about the dangers of idealizing celebrities,
Right.
how that can distort our views on relationships.
And now we're talking about the importance of building genuine connections,
Yeah.
finding support in our own lives, rather than looking to celebrities for answers or validation.
It's like a reminder to shift our focus from the external to the internal,
Exactly.
from the superficial to the substantial.
It's about recognizing that true happiness and fulfillment come from within,
Yeah.
from cultivating self-love, nurturing our relationships, living in alignment with our values.
You know, as we're wrapping up this part of our deep dive, there's something I've been thinking about.
Okay.
The speaker in the video emphasizes the importance of seeking grace and mercy from God,
Yes.
especially in times of need. And it made me think about,
How that idea of seeking grace and mercy could apply even beyond like a religious context.
okay,
Like recognizing our own imperfections and extending that same compassion to others.
that's a really powerful way to look at it. Yeah.
Like instead of judging ourselves and others so harshly, maybe we should focus on offering support and understanding.
Especially in the context of relationships.
Totally.
We're all learning and growing. Mistakes are going to happen. It's
Right.
about creating a space where we can be vulnerable and authentic without fear of judgment.
I love that.
It reminds me of something we touched on earlier,
Yeah.
how the video contrasts the fleeting nature of trends with this idea of enduring love.
Right.
And maybe cultivating that kind of grace and compassion is part of what makes love last.
Absolutely. And it brings us back to that whole idea of choosing our role models wisely.
Yeah.
Instead of looking to sources that emphasize like perfection and unattainable standards,
Right.
maybe we should be seeking out examples of real people who embrace vulnerability, forgiveness, growth.
People who show us that it's okay to mess up, to be imperfect,
Right.
to keep learning and evolving in our relationships.
Exactly. And those role models don't have to be celebrities or public figures. They could be our friends, family members, mentors,
Yeah.
even people we admire from afar.
It's about finding those guiding lights that inspire us to be our best selves, not because they're perfect,
Right.
but because they're real.
I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
This deep dive has really challenged me to think more critically about where I'm getting my information and inspiration from,
Me too.
especially when it comes to something as important as love and relationships.
It's made me appreciate the importance of finding those sources of wisdom and guidance that resonate with my own values.
Yes.
Help me navigate all these complexities of life with grace and authenticity.
So if there's one thing I hope you take away from this conversation, it's to be mindful of who and what is shaping your beliefs, especially when it comes to something as personal and meaningful as love.
Beautifully said. And maybe it's a good reminder to ask ourselves, what are the values I want to prioritize in my own relationships?
Yeah.
And where can I find examples of those values being lived out in the real world?
That's a fantastic question to keep in mind. And remember, you don't have to have all the answers figured out.
Right.
It's a journey,
Yeah.
and it's okay to keep learning and evolving as you go.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. I hope it's given you some food for thought,
Yeah.
maybe even inspired you to do some exploring of your own.
Absolutely.